the night his aunt poured an entire glass of Chardonnay directly onto my husband's laptop. Right there in the middle of a client dinner on the 43rd floor of a Buckhead high-rise. Everyone in the room assumed she had finally had too much to drink. They were wrong. Millicent Hale had not had too much to drink. She'd had half a glass all evening. I had been watching. What she had been doing was waiting. And when she moved with the precision of someone who had decided, calmly and in advance, exactly when to make a point and how much wine to use making it. The laptop belonged to my husband. The Chardonnay belonged to her. The presentation currently glowing on the screen before it went dark had been built by me, and the young woman who had been standing in front of it, explaining my design concepts to our most important client in a voice that suggested she had conceived them herself. That was Delia. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My husband, Alec, and I had been married for 7 years. Long enough that people stopped asking when we planned to have children and started asking where we planned to retire. Long enough that his last name felt less like a social arrangement and more like a part of my anatomy. We built Hale and Voss Design together. You wouldn't know that from the website, but it was true. He had registered the LLC 2 months before I joined, back when it was just him and a logo he'd paid a college student $200 to design. I had been running brand development for a hospitality group downtown at the time. I understood how physical spaces made people feel. I understood how light angles and ceiling heights, and the weight of a material in your hand, could communicate something that a marketing budget never could. Alec understood contract. He understood business development. He understood how to walk into a room and make people want to write him a check. He was exceptionally good at that last part. In the early years, we divided everything naturally, the way people do when they trust each other and haven't yet needed to document that trust. I handled creative direction. He handled client relationships. Every major project that came through, I designed. Every major client who stayed, I had kept. We worked from our dining room table for the first year. We lost a pregnancy in the second year, quietly, and poured ourselves back into work the way people do when grief doesn't have a clean shape. By year 3, the firm had 6 employees and a lease in West Midtown. By year 5, we'd been featured in Atlanta Homes and Lifestyles twice. By year 6, I thought we could afford to breathe. That was probably when I stopped paying attention to the right things. Delia joined the firm 18 months ago. Alec introduced her as a junior designer with, and I remember this phrase exactly, incredible instincts. She was 26. Her portfolio was polished but thin. Her color sense was better than her spatial reasoning, and I thought she'd need mentoring. I did not realize I would be the one teaching her, or that she would eventually present what she'd learned as something she'd arrived knowing. It happened gradually. That's what I need you to understand. It happened so gradually that I mistook the motion for stillness. I started working from home a few days a week because Alec said the studio was getting crowded. Then I stopped attending certain client kickoffs because he said he had it covered. Then my access to the project management system stopped working, and when I asked Diet about it, they told me to check with the managing partner. When I checked with the managing partner, who was my husband, he told me there was a security migration, and my access would be restored soon. It never was. I asked twice, then I stopped asking. I told myself I was choosing balance. I told myself that stepping back wasn't the same as stepping out. I told myself a great many things that year. The Carmichael project was the largest commission Hale and Voss had ever taken. A developer named Patrick Carmichael was converting a historic building in Inman Park into luxury residences, and he wanted a design language rooted in Atlanta's architectural history without feeling like a museum. I had spent 4 months on it. 4 months of sourcing salvaged heart pine flooring from a mill in South Georgia, of finding a ceramic artist in Athens who could reproduce period tile patterns at a price the budget could handle, of calculating which way the light fell in every model unit at every hour of the day. I also baked rosemary shortbread for the reveal dinner, because Carmichael's assistant had once mentioned offhandedly that he liked savory baked goods, and I was the kind of person who remembered that. The dinner was at Carmichael's penthouse. Millicent was there because she was an early investor in the firm. She had put in $60,000 in year 2 when we needed to cover a build-out, and Alec had invited her as a matter of courtesy, or so I understood. I stepped away to the powder room. I was gone maybe 6 minutes. When I came back, Delia was standing in front of my presentation boards, not beside them, in front of them, holding a laser pointer. The heart pine reclamation was honestly the first thing that anchored the whole concept for me. She was telling Carmichael, who was nodding with the focused expression of a man investing a significant amount of money. Once I connected with the mill in South Georgia, the rest of the material palette just followed naturally. I stood in the doorway. My materials binder was on the coffee table. My handwriting was visible on the edge of a sample label. The rosemary shortbread I had made that morning was arranged on a plate beside it. Alec noticed me first. He did not look embarrassed. He looked the way a man looks when he has already made a decision and is calculating how long before you figure out he's made it. He crossed the room and spoke near my ear. "She's got it. Why don't you go sit with Millicent?" I looked at him. "Carmichael's more comfortable with Delia on this one," he said, even quieter. "She's been the face." I looked at my boards, at Delia's hand moving across the surface of 4 months of my work, at Carmichael nodding. "Alec," I said. "Please." The word came out in a tone I recognized, the one that made my name sound like a behavioral problem he'd already diagnosed. "Don't make this into something." I had heard some version of that sentence so many times I had stopped counting. It always sounded like patience. It was not patience. I took a step toward the seating area, toward Millicent, and then I heard Delia say, "I actually found the tile artist completely by accident. I was in Athens for a weekend and wandered into her studio." I stopped. She had not been in Athens. I had been in Athens. I had a credit card receipt from the coffee shop across the street from the ceramic artist's studio where I'd spent 2 hours and 3 lattes, convincing someone that a commercial project wouldn't compromise her artistic integrity. I knew which sample she'd been most nervous about scaling up. I knew how she took her coffee and which direction her studio windows faced. I turned back around. The sound came from behind me, a clean splash, then the hollow crack of a laptop sliding off the edge of a side table. The room went still. Millicent lowered her wine glass with the deliberate care of someone setting down a tool. "My hand slipped," she said. She did not sound remotely sorry. Every person in the room looked at her. Alec moved toward the ruined laptop. Delia's laser pointer dropped to her side. Carmichael blinked. Millicent looked at me, then at Carmichael. "Patrick," she said, "I owe you an apology. I've been sitting here listening to a presentation about work I know quite well from my observer role with the firm, and I've been letting a misattribution stand out of politeness." She paused briefly. Politeness rarely ages well. Carmichael frowned. "I'm sorry?" "The Inman Park concept, the reclamation sourcing, the tile commission, the entire material palette was developed by my nephew's wife." She nodded in my direction, not by the young woman currently holding the laser pointer. The room went very quiet. Delia's expression moved through several calculations quickly. Alec straightened. "Millicent, this is not the time." She turned toward him with an expression I can only describe as comfortable. The expression of someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment, and had dressed appropriately for it. "When would be the right time, Alec?" she asked. "Before or after Patrick signs the next contract?" Carmichael looked at me, then at Alec, then at Delia. "She's been removed from the day-to-day," Alec said. "This was a collaborative effort, and Delia has been." "Athens," I said. He stopped. "The ceramic artist in Athens." My voice was steadier than I expected it to be. "Tell Patrick how that sourcing happened." Delia said nothing. Alec's expression closed. Millicent glanced at the ruined laptop. "I am very sorry about the Chardonnay, Patrick. I'll replace it, of course." Carmichael appeared to have decided that watching this unfold was more interesting than being upset about the disruption. He looked at me. "How long have you been with the firm?" 7 years, I said. Since the beginning. He nodded slowly. Then he looked at Alec with the measured expression of a man who had made a great deal of money by recognizing when his perception was being managed. "I'd like to schedule a separate conversation," he said, "with both of you." Alec agreed. He didn't have a choice. But the look he gave me as Carmichael moved toward the bar cart was not the look of a man who had been caught. It was the look of a man recalculating. Millicent drove me to her house in Annesley Park. She always drove people to her house when she decided they needed to be somewhere other than where they had been. We didn't speak for several blocks. "He'll say you manipulated me," I said finally. "He always says that when he's wrong," she said. "My sister was the same way. It's a family feature." My phone showed 4 missed calls from Alec. "How long have you known something was wrong?" I asked. "Long enough." Then, more carefully, "I received a restructuring proposal last month. It came to my observer email by accident. His assistant used the wrong distribution list." My chest tightened. A restructuring proposal. He's planning to formalize Delia's role. Creative director with an equity stake. She has been here 18 months. I know. That firm is half mine. Millicent's hands were steady on the wheel. It should be. The question is whether it's documented that way. I thought about the operating agreement. The one Alec and I had both signed in year 2. The one that named us both as managing members. "I haven't read it recently," I admitted. "I thought not," she said, and then more quietly, "When did your project email stop working?" 8 months ago, server migration, he had said. "And when were you last listed on a client contract?" "A year ago, maybe longer." "And when did Delia join the firm?" I went still. I had never let myself arrange those facts in the right order before. I had kept them separate, compartmentalized, each one explainable on its own. Together they formed a different picture entirely. Alec was at the kitchen island when I came home the next morning. He had a fresh shirt on and cold coffee in front of him, which meant he hadn't slept. He looked at me and immediately looked irritated, which meant he'd spent the night preparing to be wronged. "You let her do that," I said. "No good morning." Delia has been the client-facing lead on Carmichael. She said she found the tile artist. He exhaled. She simplified for the client. She said she drove to Athens. It was a team. Alec. I sat across from him. I have the receipt from the coffee shop. I have the email where I introduced myself to the artist. I have the entire sourcing file with my name at the top of every page. He looked at the counter. "Is she getting equity?" I asked. He said nothing. "The restructuring proposal." He looked up. "It's a draft." "Answer the question." "The firm needs to evolve." "Are you sleeping with her?" The kitchen went airless. Not a comfortable silence. The pressurized silence of a room where someone is deciding which version to offer. Alex stood, carried his mug to the sink, set it down with great care. The way he always did when he wanted to appear measured while feeling cornered. "I'm not dignifying that," he said. "That's not a no." He picked up his keys. "I have a site visit." The door closed. I sat at the table until I understood that I was waiting for something that wasn't coming. Then I called Portia, a former colleague who had been the lead architect on our first hotel project before she left us to start her own practice in Savannah. We hadn't spoken in over a year. She answered on the 3rd ring. "When you were still at Hale and Voss," I said, "what was your understanding of my role?" A pause. "That's an unusual question." "Please." "Everyone understood you were the creative lead. Alec brought in the clients. You kept them." "He's been telling people." I stepped back voluntarily. A longer pause. "I heard that. I assumed you'd both decided." "I didn't decide anything." Quiet. "Then, there was a lunch. About a year ago. Alec told the senior staff that you were scaling back for personal reasons and that Delia would be taking over your client relationships." "Personal reasons," I repeated. "That's what he said." "We don't have personal reasons." "I know that now." Her voice became careful. "I'm sorry. I should have called." I told her it was okay. She had believed him because he'd made it sound believable. He had made my erasure look like a preference. He had turned my trust into a story he could tell. That afternoon, in the filing cabinet in our home office, I found the original operating agreement. I found my early employment records. I found a folder labeled with my initials and the year we'd started. Vendor negotiations, project briefs, client correspondence, materials sourcing files, every document with my name on it. Not as a spouse, not as a helper, as the creative director of a firm that had spent the last year pretending I had never held that title. I photographed everything. Then I called a family law attorney. Her name was Patricia Waverly, and she spent our first meeting asking questions Alec had quietly taught me not to ask. Who signed the vendor contracts? Whose name appeared in the client correspondence? Had I received compensation for my creative work, and in what form? Was I listed in the firm's insurance filings? Some answers were good, some were not, all of them were clarifying. Millicent called that night. "There's a partners meeting next week," she said. "He's presenting the restructuring formally. He needs a member vote. He can't vote my share without me present." "Correct. Which is why you need to be there. He'll say I've been inactive." "He will try." Her voice was steady in a particular way. Less aunt, more Vester. Let him try it in a room with the project files in front of everyone. The meeting was in the Hale and Voss conference room. The table was one I had sourced from a furniture maker in western North Carolina. The light fixtures were ones I had specified during a renovation I had overseen 4 years ago. I had sat in this room dozens of times. That morning, I walked in as someone who had not been invited. Alec looked at me the way you look at a problem that has solved itself incorrectly. Delia sat beside him. She had the practiced composure of someone who had been coached to look calm. Millicent sat at the far end of the table with her reading glasses and a leather folder, looking like someone who had attended 1,000 meetings exactly like this one and found them mildly interesting. Alec presented the restructuring fluently. New equity framework. Delia's elevation to creative director with a founding partner stake. The firm's next chapter. Very polished. Very plausible if you didn't know where any of it had originated. When he finished, Millicent raised one hand. "Before we proceed to a vote," she said, "I have some materials for the group to review." She had printed copies for everyone at the table. The original operating agreement. My project attribution files going back to year 1. Vendor contracts with my signature. 3 years of client correspondence in which I was named as lead designer. And at the bottom of the stack, a series of internal emails in which Alec had instructed his assistant to remove my name from the firm's active roster, dated 8 months before this meeting. Alec stared at the stack. "These are internal files," he said. "They're my files," I said, "from my home office. They belong to the firm. The ones with my name on them as author belong to me in the sense that I created them." I looked at him. "You spent a year telling people I chose to step back. I'd like the record to reflect that I did not choose." I was removed. The outside advisor at the end of the table leaned forward and studied the top page. One of the other stakeholders took off his glasses and sat back. Nobody spoke for a moment. Delia said quietly, "I never claimed the Athens sourcing was mine." Alec turned toward her. "At the Carmichael dinner," she said. "I misspoke. I wasn't trying to." "You said you wandered into the studio," I said. "You said you found the mill." Her jaw tightened. I was nervous. I was trying to. "Delia," Alec's voice had an edge. She stopped. The advisor cleared his throat. "The equity provisions in this proposal would require unanimous member consent under the current operating agreement." He looked at Alec. "That would include your wife." "Separated wife," I said. Alec's expression did not change, but something behind it did. "I vote no," I said. Millicent looked at me from the far end of the table, and behind the reading glasses, and the carefully maintained composure. I saw something that looked like satisfaction. The restructuring was tabled. The firm launched an internal review of project attributions. Delia resigned 2 weeks later and landed somewhere else. I heard about it and didn't follow up. Alec called me the day after the meeting. You got what you wanted, he said. I got the record corrected. You humiliated me. I thought about the reveal dinner, about the laser pointer and the shortbread and his voice, quiet and firm, telling me to go sit somewhere else. I showed them documents, I said. That's not humiliation. That's evidence. 7 years, Lauren. I had already started walking toward the window. The Decatur street below was ordinary and bright, and had nothing to do with him. Take care of yourself, Alec, I said. And I meant it the way you mean something once you no longer need it to change. Starting over at 31 is not a montage. It is a Tuesday in October when you email someone you worked with 4 years ago and hope they remember who you are. It is a Wednesday when they don't respond. It is a Thursday when a hotel brand in Charlotte calls because they found your name in a 3-year-old trade publication and want to know if you take new clients. I said yes. I said yes to everything that fall. I named the new studio Voss Creative. Alec's attorney sent a letter suggesting the name was confusingly similar to Hale and Voss. My attorney sent back a letter noting that I was, in fact, Voss and had been for 7 years, and that the original firm name had been selected in part because of my presence in it. The other side did not follow up. I hired a project manager named Hadley who was 24, frighteningly good with logistics, and entirely unimpressed by my history. On her second day, she looked at my proposed timeline for a hotel project in Asheville and said, "This is optimistic by about 3 weeks." I checked. She was right. I made her full-time the next month. 6 months later, Portia referred me to a historic building renovation in Savannah. We had lunch before I took the project, and I told her everything. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "I should have called you," she said. "You didn't know." "I should have asked." I shook my head. He made my exit look voluntary. That's how it works. It looks voluntary from the outside, because the person doing it needs it to look voluntary. She nodded. "What made you finally see it?" "Athens," I said. When Delia said she found the mill, I had been explaining away so many smaller things. But I had been there. I remembered the coffee shop across the street and the light in the studio, and which sample the artist was most worried about scaling up. Delia couldn't have known any of that, and once I couldn't explain that away, none of the other explanations held either. Portia was quiet. Then, Millicent is something. She really is. Does she do this for everyone or just you? She would say she did it for the work, I said. And she'd probably be telling the truth. Millicent invested in Voss Creative that fall. We negotiated for 2 weeks. She opened at 12%, I countered at 5%. We settled at 7.5%. And she asked for a board observer seat, that I agreed to immediately, because I had learned that having Millicent watching your numbers was worth more than any percentage point. The day she signed, she held out her hand across my conference table. "Don't make me regret this," she said. "You poured wine on a laptop for me," I said. "I think we're past regret." That was personal. She shook my hand firmly. "This is business." "Can it be both?" She considered it for exactly 1 second. 7.5% says it can. In February, Voss Creative was nominated for a Regional Design Award for the Asheville project. The ceremony was in Charlotte. An event coordinator met me at the entrance and walked me toward the front section of the ballroom. "Mrs. Voss," she said, "you're right here." There was a card in front of a chair near the center of the front row. Clean, simple font. My name, founder, Voss Creative. I stood there for a moment longer than was probably graceful. I thought about a conference table covered in documents, a penthouse dinner on the 43rd floor, a laser pointer in someone else's hand moving across my work, a voice quiet and certain, telling me to go sit somewhere else. Millicent appeared beside me. She looked at the name card and then at me. "You're staring at a chair," she said. "I know." I picked up the card, turned it over in my hands. "I'm remembering something." "What?" "The last time someone told me where to sit." She said nothing for a moment, then simply, "And?" I set the card back down, pulled out the chair, sat. "This one's better," I said. She made a sound that was not quite a laugh, but was as close as Millicent got to one in public. The work doesn't disappear when someone tries to take it. That's what I didn't understand for too long. I thought that because my name had been removed, the work itself had been erased. But the vendors remembered me. The clients remembered me. Portia remembered. Carmichael remembered. He called Voss Creative in March about a new project, and when Hadley asked how he'd found us, he said a mutual contact had referred him. "Which contact?" she asked. "An investor," he said. "Older woman, very direct." Millicent hadn't mentioned it. Of course she hadn't. She would call that business, not sentiment. Maybe it was both. I'd stopped insisting they had to be different things. There are things that can be taken from you. A title, an office, a name on a door, a chair at a table where you once sat without thinking about it. Those things are real losses, and I won't pretend they weren't. But the work you did, the judgment you built through years of actually showing up, the relationships you earned by being the person who remembered which coffee shop was across the street from the studio, which buyer needed a different approach, which client you had to call on a Thursday instead of a Monday, those are harder to steal than people think, especially when you stop waiting for permission to claim them. I sat in that chair with my name on the card in front of it, and I finally understood the difference between a seat someone gives you and one you pull out yourself. For most of my marriage, I had been the first kind. I was done waiting for the second.